Hi, everybody. Hello, and
Hello.
welcome to the Mom Project's Mentor Power Hour. I'm Elizabeth Shackelford, and I am so happy to moderate today's discussion with Irka West, Kristen Oleksinsky, and Emily Cohen from PowerSchool. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
We're happy to be here.
Yes, thank you for having us.
We're so excited. Well, and today we're going to get into everything PowerSchool. We're going to talk about the mission, we're going to talk about the company culture, DE&I efforts, and current career opportunities. We are also going to talk about how moms and advocates can pivot their careers into a new role or organization through upskilling and training, and the importance of mentorship and how PowerSchool supports career development through every stage of the journey. A few housekeeping notes. This session is recorded and will be sent to attendees afterwards via email and on YouTube after. We will have time for audience questions at the end of your session. So please add your questions into the comment section on the right-hand side of the screen throughout the session, and we will try to get to all of them at the end. And before we start, I just want to share a bit more about our speakers. Irka West is a solution engineer with the Higher Ed Division of PowerSchool. She's held a variety of positions in human resources, user experience, higher education, sales, and customer advocacy. She's also worked at several different colleges and universities as an adjunct professor, teaching various communication courses, including public speaking and business communication. Irka graduated from Texas A&M University with a degree in communication. And Kristen Oleksinsky joined the PowerSchool team as a UX designer in July of 2022 after completing her UX design professional certification through the RISE Scholarship Program, which is the Mom Project's nonprofit arm. Prior to her career shift, she worked as a freelance designer and held roles as a graphic designer at the University of Michigan, Borders Group Incorporated, and Ford Motor Company. She holds a dual BFA in graphic design and industrial design from the University of Michigan. And Emily Cohen currently serves as the program director for the customer operations team at PowerSchool. Her responsibilities have focused on change management, special projects and initiatives, data and reporting, and incubation of new processes and programs. Prior to working in EdTech, Emily worked in higher education enrollment and was an elementary school teacher for several years. Okay, now that we've introduced you, let's get started. I know I shared a bit about your background, but first I kind of want to dive into where did your career begin and how did you get to where you are today? Emily, let's start with you.
So I went to college and went to a liberal arts college and I studied geography. I've never done anything with my geography degree directly, but I think it lives in my brain in terms of how I think. So after college, I spent over 15 years working in a lot of roles in education. That's always been kind of in my heart and my passion in terms of work. I've done seasonal educational jobs. I've worked in a number of higher ed institutions. And I was an elementary school classroom teacher for about 6 years in there as well. And I will say, for me, leaving the classroom and marketing myself successfully out of that, you're a first grade teacher, was really the biggest challenge I've had in career pathing to date for me. A lot of trial and error, a lot of building relationships, identifying those transformational skills that I had, and really what was most important to me if I wanted to be doing something else. I came to PowerSchool from higher ed, so my path out of the classroom was back to higher ed. Worked in behind the scenes in sales for 6 years, and then this December made a big kind of pivot within PowerSchool and joined the customer operations team about a year ago. And I do strategic programs. And the way I see my role is it's an organization of about 1,000 plus people. There's a few different departments in there, services, support, and I run a team of 3 that really helps support the whole umbrella of that organization. So that's me.
Oh, thank you. Irka, what about you?
Right. I actually had a liberal arts background too. So, and I was kind of laughing while Emily was talking because I'm like, I also was kind of all over the board with my career path. So I graduated with the degree in communication. I loved it so much. I stayed on and got a master's, which really is what kind of structured kind of my career path, because every time I was in between something, I'd always go back to working in a college or a university and teaching as an adjunct instructor. So I've done that off and on, teaching communication classes, which has been nice, especially when my kids were little. It's just a little bit of extra, salary coming in while I could stay home with them. So I've had background in like HR. That was for a couple of years. I worked in I went back to the university I graduated from and worked as a career counselor, and that was really fun. So, but I've done just little bits and pieces. Another thing I did, which was I guess tied to, I think it's Emily, is that it's Kristen, is I worked in UX. So I used a user experience and design, and that was also just kind of a side trail that wasn't liberal arts centered, but just something else to do. But I came to PowerSchool also through just relationships, just through knowing people who knew people, and got in with being able to interview, because my background while in higher ed and teaching communication class was also, just like Emily said, it's a little bit hard to be like, oh, but I could also train your employees, not just teach in front of students, like you had to help them make the connection. So I actually started in marketing when I came on, with customer advocacy and just working with customers in general, using that communication skills. And then recently, just a few months ago, I switched over to the higher ed side of PowerSchool. And so now I'm actually back kind of where I've been off and on for over 20 years now, working with higher ed institutions. So that's been me.
Oh, Kirsten, what about you? Or Kristen, excuse me.
Sure. Hi. So I have a degree in graphic design, as you mentioned. But as everybody was talking, I'm thinking back to how I arrived at that. I was actually on the path into engineering, taking a lot of core classes, math classes, but had that creative streak. And so I did end up getting a degree in graphic design and industrial design. And most of my professional experience has been in the marketing side of things, working in a lot of roles, building websites, print projects. And sort of as tech started to become more popular, websites became the primary thing that we were designing. But still, I was missing sort of that logical side, that like analytical side. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of crossover with designing websites and thinking about the user experience. How are people interacting with this site? But then when I applied to the RISE program and took the UX certification, it sort of filled in all those gaps where I could utilize my logical side, really think deeply about problems, and then tap into the creative side as well when we're conveying things in a intuitive way so that the end user really knows what's going on. So yeah, that's sort of how my path arrived here at PowerSchool. I'm very new, and I'm really loving working with everybody.
Well, and speaking of PowerSchool, for those that don't know, can you all tell us more about what the company does as a whole? What PowerSchool does overall.
I can start. So PowerSchool is an education technology company with a very large footprint in the K-12 education space, and we're also in higher ed. And so I work in K-12 at PowerSchool, and PowerSchool provides technology solutions for school systems. At the core of that is a student information system for student records. And often that's how we're known. So, there's an app for that. From contractors at my house to old high school friends in Chicago, they'll be like, isn't that the app I use for my kid at school for their grades and their attendance? I'm like, yep, that's the company that I work for. Mm-hmm. But really, PowerSchool has dozens of solutions. So from everything from online registration tools to student assessments, learning management, job applications for teaching, professional development. We have ERP software. And I'd say a majority of school systems in North America do use PowerSchool for at least one of their applications. And we have a pretty broad international footprint as well. So pretty cool place to be in terms of, no matter what role we're playing, we're making a pretty, I feel like we're making an impact just with the amount of education we touch out there with our product. And Erica, you work in a different branch of PowerSchool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I work on the higher ed side. And so we do mostly K through 12. We have a lot of, we touch like every part of it, which I think is amazing. And for the higher school or the higher ed part, we actually mostly focus on the HR side. So that's been a whole learning curve for me. It's just learning more about HR processes and the different modules we offer them. So we do that. And we also have some faculty information systems that we provide. So yeah, just a lot of the technology that goes with that. But just as a side note, my kids are in a district that uses PowerSchool products. And so that's always kind of fun, because if you say, oh, I work for PowerSchool, and they might take a second to try to think where that, and then you go, oh, it's Schoology, or oh, it's Naviance. And they're like, oh, yeah, and so they immediately know, and, the kids know that you know that. And then they're like, oh, you should tell them to do this. And so, it's always kind of a nice, kind of connection to make with the teachers in the district, having this as a background. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to what Emily said, knowing that you're making an impact, like in the day-to-day lives of parents and, all of the children that it impacts. So let's focus now on talking about working parent life at PowerSchool. What policies and benefits and flexibility does PowerSchool offer to working parents to make work-life integration seamless? Emily, do you want to? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, Kristen can start, or Emily can start. Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to start. Yeah. So I would say for me, prior to having a family, I worked in an office with a standard commute and going in 9 to 5. So for me, once I had a family, I worked as a freelancer, just so I could have flexibility in my life. And so I think the big realization that there were companies out there offering flexibility to parents was sort of eye-opening to me. I had no idea that there had been this shift while I was freelancing to prioritizing this lifestyle for families. And so I think not having a commute, the fact that they're like a remote first company, that I'm home, I'm available if I need to, not drive 20 minutes so that I can get home to get my kid to practice. That's a big deal. That's a huge perk, and that I can still feel energized by the work I'm doing, and then still be available as a parent is just a huge benefit. So yeah, the flexible schedule. I've had multiple events, sporting events, where my manager has willingly let me have a few hours off so I can make sure to be there to cheer on my kids. That's stuff that you can't put a price tag on. It's so valuable. So I'd say for me, that's the highlight of working for a company like PowerSchool.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about the Mom Project, that, it's not just flexibility, but it's the respect for flexibility within an organization that really allows you to be able to do that, and knowing that your leaders in the organization wants you to go to practice and wants you to be able to pick your kids up from school makes all the difference to feel kind of at ease of doing those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that too. It was the same thing as that, I have always heard, the buzzwords are work-life balance, and so many companies don't do that, and they might say it's good, but then if you actually try to get off that time in the middle of the day or something like that, it's not always, doesn't go over as well. It's the same here, flexibility. I mean, I'm thinking of just this morning, my daughter called me up, and who never calls me up from school, and she's like, I had a nosebleed and I need a new sweatshirt because I had blood all over me, and I could take the 5 minutes in between, my meetings and just run it up to her. That was just, it's great, and so and having the flexibility to take them to the doctor, or to, do whatever that's needed. And it's okay. You just take a couple hours, you get that done, because they know as long as you're getting your work done, which we all do, like we're all, I think that the company especially gives such a value. They say everybody's working hard, and that we hear that over and over again. They recognize that everybody's putting as much into it. And they don't think that people are off hiding in remote places, just kind of goofing off. They recognize we're all working maybe even harder than if we were in an office sometimes, because we just get a lot done. So, and we enjoy it, it's like I love being on calls with my coworkers, because I enjoy my coworkers. Like, they're pretty interesting people that are all across the country. So that's a couple of things that are great. So, yeah.
I can add the perspective. I actually technically work in an office for PowerSchool. So we have an office in Roanoke, Virginia. And ever since COVID, we've been experimenting. What does hybrid look like? What is the remote experience? How do we engage in lots of different ways and levels? So I'm someone who goes in the office a couple times a week, but I'm in Virginia. We're headquartered in California. So I think one cool thing for me before PowerSchool, I'd always worked in my community, had a job that was local to me. But it's cool, there's 3 time zones in North America. We have employees in India. So I can go grocery shopping at 3:00 and make that my lunch break and have the flexibility of, the lull in the shopping moment and kind of fit in my breaks more uniquely. So I take full advantage of our time zone differences and that people aren't necessarily expecting me to take a traditional time during the day for a break. And I think that gives us a lot of additional flexibility. We're pretty progressive in our benefits with things like discretionary time off and all of those things, I think just lend themselves to trying to figure out how to be on the front end of where a lot of work is going since COVID happened and just in an accelerated way, exploring what that can look like. And PowerSchool has been really thoughtful and engaged in doing that as part of our employee experience.
That's amazing. I know we kind of talk about it a lot, but how the pandemic changed everything and kind of made it easier for people to have this work-life balance that was, I always went into an office. And so now when I can run to the grocery store or call, I have a meeting and I'm running 5 minutes late, I'm picking up my groceries. They're like, okay, just join me. I think that flexibility is key. And it also takes so much stress off of our day-to-day lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, COVID had some actually great things that happened.
Right, I know. It's we're always going to talk about COVID. I don't want to talk about it, but it always comes up. Well, and now let's talk about PowerSchool and how they handle career pivots. I mean, so many women are trying to upskill and reskill to find a role that fits their needs or schedules, and which may be outside of their previous work experience. So, what have you seen and or heard about this?
Yeah, I can go. I think that the biggest thing that I've noticed with PowerSchool is that they recognize transferable skills and they leverage them to make the best use. So I like was mentioned, I was a RISE grad, and I upskilled using the UX design certification. So I noticed that many people, they talked about this in the courses, and then I saw it reflected in PowerSchool, come to UX from other paths. They have a lot of other life experience that is actually seen as a benefit, to incorporate that into the designs to make sure we're listening to all different user groups. So to have a non-traditional background is a plus. And then just PowerSchool in general, as Emily can probably speak to, is full of former educators. And so I think that mindset just in general makes PowerSchool a place that looks at transferable skills and values them. And so I think it's a great place to make a career shift.
I could say so many things on this topic, guys. I've had a number of roles at PowerSchool. I came to PowerSchool through an acquisition. I came to EdTech looking for a change in my career, and I would say I didn't make a lateral move in this transition, but I needed a job I was working 6-7 days a week. I was traveling, and it wasn't working for my home life anymore. So, I made a pivot into EdTech and needed to kind of grow into where I wanted to be. So I think PowerSchool was really receptive to seeing where I had potential. They gave me a lot of room to identify my strengths, to grow in my strengths. There's a lot of career pathing documentation, so you can see what's my next step in role. What could I be doing that's similar to what I'm doing now and move over in the organization? And I've done both. So, I worked in a sales operational role, and they needed someone to, I did a lot of project management on my team. Once we were acquired and I was like, what do I do at PowerSchool? I went and got my PMP and my some agile certifications. So I kind of started wearing that hat, like, okay, I'm a project manager, and I manage strategic initiatives pretty well. So I started to get these cool roles and moved into those realms, and then got snatched back into a team, and they're like, you do great at enablement. And so I did sales enablement and ran newsletters and communications and awards and recognition programs for a couple of years at PowerSchool, and that was really cool and rewarding. I love change. So they're like, okay, great. Like when we have these acquisitions of companies, you can help with the integration on that and, fit my skill set. And I will say last year, and sorry, I'm going to go back to COVID. It might've been COVID. It might've been aging parents. I don't know what it was. It might've just been 2 years in a row, but I said to my manager, I think it's time for me to figure out where I continue to grow and move next. And she couldn't have been more supportive in helping support that. Kind of the informational interviews in the company, figuring out where the opportunities were. And I took my time doing that change. But in December, I completely moved organizations at PowerSchool and took on kind of a whole new hat and set of responsibilities. And people have been really supportive and embracing of that. And I've seen others do the same. I think I had a nice flip flop with somebody. Sales was losing me, customer operations was getting me, but customer operations was losing someone and sales was getting him. So it was an equal exchange, I suppose. But yeah, I've had a lot of experience. I've seen others. I've worked with others going, how'd you do that? What do I do? And I think there's a lot of room for growth and a lot of support for growth. And for me, that keeps me here. So I've been at PowerSchool for 7 years, and just knowing that I can keep growing and changing and evolving has been a real win for me to see. And sometimes people just want to stay in seat. This is where I need to be. I need to coast because that's what my life needs right now. And that's great too.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah. And I love that you've been here 7 years, because I've been here a little bit over a year. So I've been in 2 different departments here at PowerSchool. And when I was, I joined the first one through a relationship somebody who knew my manager and got me the interview. And then, I was able to interview and compete against other people to get the role. But one of the things was nice was, I was coming into a marketing role, which I have a communication background, but no marketing experience. And my manager, as part of PowerSchool, was able to be like, okay, but these are the skills we need, and you have the skills, even though you don't have a marketing background. So, the marketing was a learning curve, just kind of learning a little bit about that. But then being in the role, I was like, this isn't exactly what I love. I still love the teaching part. I still love being in front of people. And that's part of my job now, is I'm doing demos for the modules that we have in higher ed. And when I started kind of just looking around, and I was emboldened, because one of the nice things that PowerSchool does is they really have these open conversations that the managers are supposed to have with their employees. Like, let's talk about your career path. You can't stay here the whole time. You can't stay in your role the whole time. We'd love you to stay with PowerSchool, but we really want you to grow your career. And these are all part of our, annual reviews or, semi-annual reviews. So those conversations are open. And so even like the VP of marketing, she and I were meeting, and I just told her, I think I'd like something more like customer facing, more in front of people. And this was an open conversation we could have. And then this position in higher ed came up, and it was like a double whammy. I could talk to people, be in front of people and work in higher ed, which is, what I love. So I think that was it was such a great thing about PowerSchool, that they encouraged me to have these conversations. It wasn't something you had to have like, in secret, or, if you're not feeling like this is the right fit, there's something else for you. And that's kind of a nice thing too. It's like a huge company. So there is something else for you. Just are looking for skills for different, the different departments, and you just kind of find where your skills fit the best.
Well, and how freeing is that to know that, you can come to your manager and say, I'm not feeling like, and then they'll be like, great, we'll find something else. Mm-hmm. It's a testament to PowerSchool and, the leadership and organizational, how it all flows down. Mm-hmm. Well, and let's talk about, what obstacles have you faced when returning to work after a career pause, or, after making the switch to a new career? What advice would you give to our audience members on overcoming those types of career barriers?
Talk to people. I would say that over and over again. I remember when I was a career counselor, I would tell the students, get in organizations, go join something, and I remember being in school, and networking was like the huge thing. And I kept envisioning going into a room and lots of other people in business suits talking to each other. Well, we don't have to do that now, but every career, or, when I started to get back from part-time to full-time, my last couple of, I had a kind of a temporary sales position in like a plumbing company that I got because I had some friends. My kids were on the swim team, and they went to the same elementary school with this, these people, and the guy was in HR, and I said, hey, I'm looking for a job. And, we weren't good friends or anything like that. He was just like, hey, well, I can get you an interview, and that's all, that's what a lot of times they can offer you. So, but that came from, being a part of my kids' swim team and helping with that. And, then the other job, when I got the PowerSchool position, was because I had a good friend I'd met from elementary, from my kids being in elementary school, and now they're like almost in high school. And, she was like, well, what are you looking for? And she actually works at a Discovery Education. So she works at a whole nother ed tech company, but she was like, this would be a good field for you. And so she started getting me in contact with different people in different companies. So that's networking nowadays, right? And especially as moms, right? That's us networking. We are talking to the people. And I remember another person I talked to, my kid's soccer game, and it turned out she was in HR for somebody, like, we're in Houston, so it's like the big oil company or something. But she was like, send me your resume. I'm sure there we can find a place to fit. Because going back to the whole teacher thing, I was like, I can teach, and that comes with a lot of skills, but the computers that wean through your resumes aren't going to maybe see that. And maybe you're not saying the exact right words, but the people get you. And so that's 3 examples right there that I was networking at my kids' events, just talking to people. So you got to be kind of bold, I guess, to be like, hey, I'm looking for a job, and see what comes up.
Well, I can chime in. I'd say the biggest obstacle for me, and I alluded to this a little bit, was just envisioning what my life was like when I worked in an office. And I worked for some pretty traditional companies, not a lot of flexibility, a lot of very specific rules around time off, and sort of needing to kind of parse that out and save it up for different things. So I think that the biggest obstacle when I imagined returning to full-time work from freelance work was just envisioning how will that go if I need to pick up a child or whatever. And so I was encouraged. The best piece of advice I got was to just keep looking for those flexible companies, because they exist. And to be honest, I had no idea that they existed. And so to hear that was really like, it gave me the push I needed to just hold out to find the right company. I had actually been talking with another company prior to starting at PowerSchool that you could just tell from the interactions. They probably are working 80-hour weeks. They're expecting a lot of their people. They're wanting you to work, they're wanting you to work at the times that they need you, which might be late at night. Now, I want to say one caveat about that is that I have asked my manager, if I get tied up with something during the day, can I finish my work at night? Absolutely, no problem. So, but I'm not working 80 hours into the night, things like that. So, so I think that just the affirmation that flexible companies exist and to hold out until you find it was the best piece of advice I've gotten.
I'll add a few things. So, Erica, you mentioned resumes. I've rewritten my resume. So, I had 15 years of education experience, but I want to promote myself as someone in business who's got really good business skills. So I've really kind of done some hard stuff to take some things I was really part of, and my teacher jargon doesn't exist in my resume anymore. So it's like you kind of rewrite yourself for what you're looking for is a big step that I've taken along the way and coached others on. And another is, I landed in at PowerSchool, and I didn't necessarily have a lot of credentials for where I wanted to be in the organization. So I went out and got what's called a PMP, Project Management Professional certification. And, I never thought about certifications. I was always like, do I go back and get my MBA and go to grad school again? I thought really probably too big in terms of credentialing myself for the roles I wanted. But there's so many ways to get certified. So my PMP, it was 35 hours of class. It was a night class at the community college. And then I sat for an exam, and now I have this whole professional network that I'm a part of that gives me some credibility at PowerSchool as well, because that's like the gold standard in project management. So I hadn't really thought about the role, and Kristen, you just did it, of getting a certification in the direction you want to go in. There's a lot of creative ways to overcome some of the challenges of career growth that way.
Yeah, because I think I'd have to go back to school, and it sounds like a big commitment in your mind. You know, you're like, I don't know if I can handle that. But then knowing that there's so many programs or certifications out there that are just, you know, a tiny uplift in relation to like going back to school, and, you know, really does help advance your career.
And I'd love to tell a story. So, you know, a lot of times classroom teachers come to me, hey, Emily, you left the classroom. Like, how'd you do it? And I, you know, they might be looking at PowerSchool, they might not. But I had a friend, Jackie, ran with her. She had a young child. She was pregnant with her next child. Classroom teaching just wasn't where she wanted to be anymore. But it was like, what am I qualified to do? I was like, you're qualified to do so many things. Like, what part of teaching do you like? Do you like the organization? Do you like the kids? Do you like the teaching part? Like, what do you want to keep here? And I was talking to someone who's like, Emily, my friend is starting this company and it's this like kind of education thing, and he's looking for an office admin person. And, you know, you're in education, like you might know some people. And I was like, oh, I'm just talking to my friend, Jackie. So Jackie, I was like, just apply. She's like, I'm not qualified. This isn't what I have a background in. I said, yeah, but they're super excited that you have an education background. So I was like, just apply. What harm is there in applying for the job? She applies for the job. She's like, oh my gosh, Emily, they called me the next day. Oh my gosh, Emily, they offered me the job, but it's way too little money. And I said, well, tell the guy, this is what I need my salary to be to, you know, go with all this. But it gave her the confidence. Oh my gosh, Emily's been telling me I'm really qualified for stuff, but until she put herself out there and, you know, found that connection, and the velocity of her job search from there was fantastic. She didn't end up at PowerSchool, but she's, you know, she's grown and developed, and she does project management stuff too, coincidentally. And every time I run into her, she's so happy. And all it was just taking the confidence that she was more qualified than she realized to make a very different step.
Yeah, and we talk about all the time, like those life skills are skills. You know, work is work, no matter if it's paid or not. And so you have to remember, like, you have valuable skills to bring to the table, and you have to think about those in terms of how they transfer over. Well, and since this is Mentor Power Hour, we like to ask a question about the impact that mentorship has had on your career and your career journey. What role has a mentor played in your path? And what advice would you give to someone looking to get involved in a mentorship relationship as a mentor or as a mentee? Emily, let's start with you.
I would say just generally mentors have helped me find confidence in myself. PowerSchool has a mentor-mentee program. I do that every year. And I will say I get a lot of confidence and experience and exposure out of being a mentor for mentees, seeing people who are in different career places than me. And sometimes my mentee has been at the same level in the organization, more or less. They're really interested in learning something new. And sometimes my mentee is earlier on in their career or anything, but I get so much value out of the insight and the freshness they give me to see where I'm at in my career and my place. And I will say I lean heavily. So I'm based in Roanoke, and my village of women who are also in technology fields in the Roanoke Valley, and just doing morning coffees, and we do lunch programs, and we have kind of every couple months power hour after work where we get together. But just having that community of women who are trying to do the same thing with their careers. It's not just one mentor, but I can also call them up, and they're a safe person. You know, they're not work. To just sort of talk through how would you navigate this scenario. But we've been talking about it, just having that network. And I love it when someone says, will you be my mentor? You know, like, and it's just putting yourself out there to start that relationship, because who's going to say no to that? You know, like, sure. Let's talk more about what that could look like.
Yeah, I had to give this question some thought, because I think when I hear mentor, I picture this really formal, big, established, like long-standing thing. And like I had mentioned before, that best piece of advice to look for these flexible companies, it came from a project manager within the Mom Project who had coached me through some things. And that ended up being a very short-term but really impactful mentorship relationship. She ended up helping me with negotiating the contract, looking at sort of what I'm looking for in a company in general. And I can think of a couple other examples of really short-term mentorship things. I have a friend who's in the industry, and he was able to give me some advice on some like benchmark standard things within the UX industry. And then even my brother, who obviously knows me really well, he's also a designer. He encouraged me. He's like, you need to get into tech. This is a good fit for you, the way you think. And so just encouraging me on a next step. And so, while mentorship can be a long-standing thing, it can also be these little nuggets of encouragement that you get along the way as you're networking with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, mine was mostly outside of, I know PowerSchool is actually having a mentor sign up. I noticed it starts like November 1st. And I was like, oh, I should probably try to do that. I've been here a year now. I feel like I'm going to be a mentor.
Definitely do it.
Right. But for me, it was I referred to the friend of mine who was really just kind of like my champion, like she just championed me the whole time. And she had been working, she started in as a teacher. Then she went back to school and became like the educational technology person contact for her school. And then that's what propelled her into working for Discovery Ed. So she had a clear, and she worked, the whole time while her kids were little, so that when I was ready to get out of part-time, naturally started talking to her. But I think it kind of goes back to the whole, like your story, Emily, with your friend, where they said there was one salary or whatever. I remember filling out applications and I'd be like, well, what should I put for this? And she's like, put more, she's like, put a higher salary, they'll take you more seriously, and it was really interesting advice to get from her. She's like, if you put too low, they're going to think you don't really think you deserve that, and they can always just come back and say, well, that's not really what we're offering here. Would you be able to work for that? And, a lot of times you're like, yeah, I would, so,
Yeah.
And just not being afraid to kind of negotiate that. One of our recruiters actually had a tip that I noticed on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. And she said, don't be afraid to negotiate with a multi-million-dollar company. I mean, like they're making, and all you're asking for is what, pocket change, essentially, some of them to some of these big companies, And so I think that was that's where mentors really kind of emboldened me, was to ask what you're worth, because you have these skills and you do, and maybe you've never made that amount of money in your life, but maybe it's just because you did part-time and that you never really had that opportunity. So just to be emboldened to just ask for what you think you deserve. So.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to Emily's story about like her friend and having to be like, no, you have way more to offer. And I think sometimes someone else has to tell you that, because you could kind of get in your own head about your worth or what you bring to the table. And so you need those people in your life to be like, no, you got to have a reality check. This is way more than you think. So
yeah, definitely.
What parting advice for, all the working parents that joined us today, what would you give to them as they work towards achieving their career goals? It's a loaded question. I know we've covered a lot.
I love this question. I love this question because it made me think about when I first started looking at, shifting a little bit from graphic design into UX and what would that look like. I guess I had no idea where this would end up. I had no idea, like PowerSchool was not my on my radar when I applied for that scholarship. Like it was just the next step. So I guess that would be my takeaway, is like, just take that next step, just sign up for that program, see where it goes, because you just never know where that will take you. And it can take you to some really cool places, obviously.
Mine would probably be, and I think of my mom too when I'm thinking about this, because she also raised 4 kids, and went back to work after staying home when she was younger, is to not be afraid to take the jobs that are not as glamorous right away when you're first starting. I referred to the fact that I went and worked for a plumbing AC company, and I'm like, and it's a big one here in Houston. Everybody would know the name, but it's still a plumbing technical, it's an AC company. But it was like, getting that sales experience on there. I also learned SharePoint and different programs that I'd never even seen before, because in education we never dealt with those. And even just that year of time working for something that wasn't like super glamorous or like that. My mom, I remember, she started at like a shutters company or something way back when, and she like taught herself all these computer programs, and eventually went on to work for major companies, including like PayPal and eBay, and and then ended up at a very high level when she was done. But it's because she started with teaching herself kind of some of the basic stuff, and these companies are the ones that might be more willing to take a chance for you. So it's you have your dream job and you want to work for it, but sometimes, especially if you're coming with nothing, it's okay to get some of that a good base, a good foundation at maybe a company that you don't ultimately want to stay at or be at, or for a long time, but it's a great place to start. So
yeah, and thinking about those transferable skills.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Emily, what about you?
I'd say like one is just put yourself out there, have tenacity, go for it. And I'm trying to watch some of the chat and comments. Brittany, you asked about my PMP, and I don't know if this is where you're going, but I went for it. I filled out the application. I signed up for the test. I was like, if I fail the test, I'll take it again. I'm not going to overthink it for 6 months and just keep studying. Like, I'm going to just, if I fail, I'll figure out where I missed. I did not ace that test, but no one's ever going to see that. They know that I passed it and I have my PMP, and I went for it. So I don't know if that answers your question. Feel free to follow up. But the other piece of that is patience. I love that I'm a director at PowerSchool, and I probably, my qualifications for that might have existed years before I got there, but it took time and developing my skills and time in seat and kind of career pathing to get where I am. And PowerSchool does do a really good job of defining some steps in a career path with some timing with it. But it does take time. And sometimes, Erica, you're so lucky that you were able to, within a year, pivot to customer facing. But sometimes you sit where you are for a little longer than you're comfortable with, and just trust that you're going to get where you're trying to go. And if I could go back to myself along the way, I would just say, like, have patience, have trust, put yourself out there, but also like let it happen when it's going to happen. As I said, I failed a lot trying to get out of teaching and try to figure out how to move my career in this direction, and get there.
Yeah.
Your part about barely passing the course or whatever it was just funny, because I always think about the whole, like, the doctors that are out there, right? They always say, like, half the doctors out there graduated in the bottom half of their class, so
you're like, great.
They're still a doctor, right? Exactly. It's a little nerve-wracking, but at the same time, you do what you can, and then you get better, so
yeah. So I think now we are ready for the Q&A, and I had actually just clicked over to the comments because I can't watch them or else I'll get so distracted. But we have so many questions, so we're going to launch in, and we'll put them up on the screen. Okay, question. For a mother who has been on a career break for 3 years and wants to return to work now, what is the first step I should take? What is the best way to land a returnship? This is a great question.
Well, I can plug plug the RISE program. That was my first step after I didn't really take a career break because I was working freelance, but it was definitely a shift from working for myself to working full time. And so I think looking around at the different certifications and things that might fill in any gaps that you feel you have would be a great place to start. It does build confidence. It's fun to see the things you already know and then see the things that you still have to learn and practice those skills. So I think that was a great way to build confidence before finding a job in the full-time workforce.
And we'll make sure to put the information for RISE in the comments or in the chat, so everyone can go and take a look.
I'd say network. And even if you're an introvert, so again, I'm very involved in PMI, Project Management Institute. There are a lot of outgoing people who go to events, but a lot of people who show up as like, what are the trends coming to Agile in the next 3 years? I'm sorry, that's not going to be a bunch of extroverts where you're going to be like in the corner. And the reality is you're going to have recruiters at that event who are, supporting that part of the job market. So whatever the career piece is for you, no matter what your personality is, being in a room full of strangers, professional networking events that have some content tied to them aren't probably as scary as they might seem. And they are a great way to build relationships outside of your existing network and just sort of dabble at what things look like, learn the language, meet some people. I think there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, talking to people, like we've mentioned before, people that you may not think might add anything, or might be completely different, but they, everybody still has something to add. So, and I remember, when I got into marketing in the first place, they had all the AMA stuff. And so they'd always have something in Houston, and, you could go to that and just talk to people. So I'm, looking for organizations like that where you can talk to people in your field is a great idea.
Thank you for those insightful answers. Okay, what do you suggest if you don't quite fit a job description but want to get into PowerSchool? Single mom, I'm in human resources and starting Rise, woohoo, in December of the Google certification, and I'd love to be in program management, HR assistant. I love training and teaching and being in front of people and helping people with flexibility.
Yeah, certifications. Like, we've mentioned before. I mean, I did, they had online, there's a place called Coursera or something like that. There's a few online that are very, and they give you can get the PMP through that. I got like a smaller version of that. I took a few courses to help go towards that when I was looking to pivot. But, that's the biggest thing is you got to have the language, right? So taking the community college, like you said, the class, something like that helps them see that the skills that you're serious about acquiring the skills that you need to get into that position. Because they don't have a lot of time to maybe train you on the job, so you've got to kind of take the step towards it.
And building off a language, what language do you use in your resume? I know when I couldn't really figure out, like maybe I'll stay in education, maybe I won't. I think I had 3 resumes with different sets of words to describe me. So what are the words that are being used to describe the qualifications for that job, and how can you build that into your application and how your resume looks, any cover letter looks, whether it's PowerSchool or not? There's a lot of AI in the back end of those application systems that are looking for those connections. And so where you can try to customize the language for each job that you're applying for. Being honest, but you can still customize it.
Yes, and to piggyback off of that, I think really looking at the transferable skills and finding a way to articulate those in a meaningful way. Because even if you don't necessarily fit all of the qualifications, if you can find a way to make that connection for somebody, like, hey, I have experience in this because of my experience in this, and draw that connection for them. It's a great way.
Yeah, looking at, these job applications or, job listings, if you really want to just kind of start, as you look at the words that they're using to describe the position and see how much you can fill in on your side, to see if you can, like, same thing as Emily, I had several different versions of my resume where I highlighted, did I want to go into education? Did I want to, go corporate? What did I want to focus on? And I had a whole listing of my skills up at the top so that they could kind of focus on it. And also so that the computers could, the AI could, find those particular words. But, also when you get into the job descriptions, man, if you can't rewrite that in a certain way, then you got to look around and go, what do I need to get so that I have that program? And there's courses online, there's courses at community college, something like that. And then at least the word shows up on the resume because you've gotten that certification and it gets you in more.
Those are great answers. Are there any mentor opportunities for moms within PowerSchool? I'm in my 2nd week here and would love some friendly connections.
We have a women, so we have ERGs, employee resource groups, and we have an active one for women. So that's a great way to do that. There's the Mom Project, but I'd say really kind of just our internal workings. We have a really good intranet called Huddle. But there's a bunch of employee resource groups, and some of them definitely complement this type of request. We're also heavy users of Slack. So asking kind of your team, like, what are the cool Slack channels for parents or for pet lovers or for, whatever. And you just meet people. And the other way I organically meet people at work is like, I put in a ticket, I Slack the person that it was assigned to. I say thank you. I kind of make that a real relationship with them. And there's a lot of people in IT that I know because I do that. Whereas if all I had done was put in tickets for the last 7 years, I might not have any side relationship. They do an excellent job getting things done. So I don't know if that helps, Emily. But
There's also, if you read the newsletter we get on Fridays, is it the 5 at 5? There's a couple different ones that go out. There is opportunities that pop in there for there's a Power Parents group that I'm a part of that was like, we need people who are employees but also have kids in a district, and that's been fun getting to know that. There's also a Power Connect or Power Voice, that's what it is, and we've been able to give feedback on town halls and how our departments are feeling. So if you read those newsletters, they actually have a lot of those that come out and they say, hey, we're looking for people to help. There's like a health one. There's different ones that come out, and you just kind of got to reach out and just say, hey, I'll be a part of this. There's sometimes a form you fill out or whatever. And so it's been a great way to meet people in different parts of the organization.
And those are great tips too for working in a remote environment. I feel like it's so hard sometimes when you're not in the room with everybody. And Emily, your comment about like just slacking people and saying thank you makes all the difference. But I'm going to take that advice with me after this and just slack some people. All right. Mentorship is something that I have always been looking for, but I've had a hard time finding someone that doesn't require compensation. I'm enrolled in the RISE program and I'm excited for the mentorship in that program. But how do you find a mentor that isn't a life coach when you aren't in an organization or have network that can help?
I think RISE is going to be great for that. Aside from just, I think that I've noticed several mentorship things over the past year or two come and go. Like, I think they're maybe more short-lived programs. But I think that there's a huge community that your cohort in RISE will, it'll come with that. And I think just putting yourself out there, talking to people, building those relationships within your cohort and within the RISE community, I think you might naturally find some good mentorship opportunities, because not everybody that's in RISE is brand new to the field. Some of the people have advanced degrees, have been working in related fields for years and years. And so, I think that is a great starting place to sort of build those relationships within the RISE community.
I love that. Kristen, how did you market / storytell pivoting from freelance and self-employment to looking for full-time employment? This is a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Let's see. How did I market or storytell? I think just being really authentic, talking about the things I loved about freelance, talking about the projects that I did as a freelancer, making sure to include those. In my field, you need to have a portfolio. So making sure to include those projects in your portfolio so that you can talk about them. I don't know that I felt like it needed a lot of marketing. It was just sort of talking about the skills that were developed as a business owner, working for yourself, talking about how those things can transfer. I think just looking at all of the skills that you have gained and how those can benefit your future employer is a great way to sort of storytell about how your experiences have grown you as a person and what you can offer.
Emily, do you have recommendations of groups in Roanoke? I'm just looking for this type of group. I'm looking for just this type of group.
So there's a group called Low Tech. They're part of the Roanoke-Blacksburg Technology Council, so RBTC. Our coffee dates once a month are free. It's a great way to start. And feel free to reach out to me directly. But I'd say lots of communities have that. So just kind of the village of women in the workforce groups. I think there's a demand for that. That demand has not shrunk at all. And I think we've gotten creative at how to do that with busy schedules. Like I said, there's a 8 a.m. morning jolt once a month where it's just you hop on Zoom. There's some kind of life coach stuff that goes on in the middle. It's so accessible. And, quarterly in-person lunches. Some people can do them, some people can't. Some people can do after work, some people can't. But yeah, that's the one in Roanoke. But I'd say that's not unique to Roanoke to have groups like that out there. And I've also found in my professional groups that aren't through work, there's often job seekers, and there's an assumption that job seekers are showing up at those, and they're they're great venue, virtual or not.
Yeah. What would you define as transferable skills? I have lots of skills, but I'm not sure what's transferable.
Communication skills are transferable. They're huge. They're everywhere, right? And different ways of saying that and different ways of that being manifested, right? So it could be that, you're good at writing, you're good at, managing, you're good at just being in front of people, or you're just, there's lots of different ways. So, there's this, they call them hard skills and soft skills, I believe. I know it's soft skills because that's usually what I've had to bank on most of my life. I don't know what the other ones are called because I've never been an engineering or accounting person, I have soft skills, think of what's the movie Office Space. I have people skills or whatever the line is. But, so, and it's not just those, right? I mean, but those are very key, right? So the position I got into now, after I got hired, they were like, you wouldn't believe how many people, because we had to do a practice demo, right? And they said, you wouldn't believe how many people had good experience, but when they got on and they tried to demo their sample product or whatever, weren't great at it. They didn't have the ability to speak in front of somebody, do it on a computer on a Zoom call or whatever. So those are your soft skills. So I'm going to say somebody else can take the other transferable skills.
Former classroom teacher. I had 40 minutes to teach math, 20 minutes to teach writing. My time management internal clock was pretty darn amazing coming out of that. Communication skills. I wrote classroom newsletters. My people skills with my parents, that's a customer skill. My ability to build relationships with parents as a classroom teacher, that's customer service in another field. So it's, I don't know if that helps, Susan, but I think it's just okay, how would you repackage this into what I'm looking for? And like I said, I did a lot of that with the classroom.
Yeah, and since this is the Mom Project, there are a ton of transferable skills as a parent. Time management, operations. You're running a somewhat crazy household depending on what's going on, what ages and stages of your kids. But those skills transfer. If you're able to, run a tight ship despite all of these things going on, that can transfer. I think there are probably resources online to figure out how to phrase those to make them work on a resume. But yeah, I'm sure you have a lot of transferable skills.
Yes. I was like, mom skills.
Yes.
And Magdalena put in the comments, your organization skills and organizing family life and birthday parties, those are all very big transferable skills. And the other thing I thought of what we were talking about today is ask a friend, if you can't think about what you're innately good at, talk to your friends because they probably see the positives of you more than sometimes you can. So ask your friend what you're really good at. And those will also kind of help build what you can build out as your transferable skills. Okay, well, that hour quickly flew by. I can't believe, I was looking at the time, but thank you all so much for joining us today. I mean, hearing about PowerSchool and also hearing about your professional journeys has been so inspiring. And I hope that all of our attendees have also gotten something out of today's session. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.